Good afternoon, folks, and welcome to the Pervasive Media Studio Lunchtime Talk. These talks are live every Friday, both here in the building and live online. Hi, if you're watching us online. So whether you're in Bristol or you're far away, you can join in the conversation. So my name is Martin O'Leary. I am the head of studio here. I'm a white man in my 40s, long hair and a beard, wearing a kind of fluffy beige jumper today because it's quite cold out. Every Friday, we throw open the doors of the Pervasive Media Studio for Open Studio Friday, offering you the chance to spend some time in our space, hot desking alongside our residents and staff from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. So a especially big welcome to anyone who's new to the studio. Can anyone who's new to the studio put your hand up? Okay, quite a few. Yeah, all right. Bringing in the crowds here.
Good stuff.
This bit is for you. What is the Pervasive Media Studio? We're a diverse and collaborative community exploring creativity and technology, everything from comedy to coding and product development to performance art. And we're a partnership between Watershed, where we are right now, UE Bristol and the University of Bristol, and we're funded by Arts Council England. And what we do is we offer studio space, including desks, meeting rooms, events and opportunities, all for free to our residents as part of a spirit of generosity and mutual exchange. And most of all, we're a place for people to take risks with embryonic ideas and to make some time for collaboration. So just a few notes before we begin. Please do feel free to move around. There's a kitchen back there. You can grab some tea or coffee or a glass of water. If you need to take a break at any point, we have a quiet space just next to this space. So to my left, your right, around the corner there, there's a little room with some sofas and beanbags and things, fairly well soundproofed. So if you want to pop in there at any point, you're welcome. We're not expecting a fire drill today. If you hear a fire alarm, it is probably real. The fire exits are at the other end of the studio. Again, my left, your right, at either end. But in any event, one of the studio team will direct you towards them should you need them. And there are accessible toilets, including baby change, over there in the corridor just next to the kitchen. There'll be a Q&A at the end of this talk. So if you're watching online, please pop your questions into the YouTube chat. Jo is here. She'll be your voice in the room today. If you're in the building, please raise your hand and I'll send around a microphone so that folks at home can hear what you're saying. You can get news on all of our future talks by heading to watershed.co.uk/studio, at Pervasive Media Studio at mastodon.social on Mastodon, at pmstudiouk.bsky.social on Blue Sky, or at Pervasive Media Studio on Instagram. All right. Our speakers for today are Nasce and Pete Nancollis. Ant and Pete are creative technologists, synth nerds, studio residents, and partners in 5 of 12, which is a spatial design studio. Together, they explore new ways of interacting with the virtual world and creating electronic music. Today, they're going to talk about the influences that led them to create a musical fidget toy, Playtonik, explore how we play and how the virtual world lets us build the impossible. So please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Ant and Pete.
Thanks. Hi everyone, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. Pete's joining us today from Chepstow. He couldn't make it into the studio today, sadly, with his bad back. So Pete, can you hear us okay?
Yep, I can hear you.
He's talking as well. So yeah, this talk was originally scheduled for September, but sadly COVID hit. And remember COVID? That's still a thing. It hit and we had to reschedule, sadly. So the talk's gone through a lot of revisions and a sort of evolution a bit. Alternative titles include How We Came to Make a Musical Fidget Toy, or my personal favourite, more recently, 2025, a MIDI Odyssey, which is kind of what it's kind of become. Just a quick word of warning, Pete and I are both engineers, but I promise you there's only one graph, one vaguely technical chart in this entire presentation. So a little bit about us. So yeah, I'm an audiovisual tinkerer. Both Pete and I are residents in the studio here. Every photograph that I seem to take, my head is massive, and it's normally because I'm self-immersed. Normally, my head isn't that big compared to Pete. But that's us in the studio, joining back in spring. I'm a musician. I'm a programmer. In Bristol, I run electronic music open mic nights with We All Play Synth. And I'll now hand over to Pete, check his microphone's working, to introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Pete. I'm an animator, product designer, and programmer. I enjoy chaos, complexity, and general noise making. And together, we are 5 of 12. So we've been working together for about a year now. Our partnership is based around shared experiences and interests in things like game engines, musical instruments, and all things MIDI. We previously worked together at Ultraleap, where we spent several years building applications for hand tracking and haptics. Having formed our partnership, we wanted to build something together, but where to start? So we started to look for inspiration. And one thing we kept coming back to was the common love for weird and wonderful musical instruments, especially electronic ones.
Synths. That's why we're here, right? So you might think of synthesizers as these very complex keyboard instruments, full of knobs and dials, great big tangles of cables, and they often very much are that. They're a very mathematical way of creating sounds, and they can also create nearly any sound imaginable as well. Especially modern digital synths can basically create any sound you can imagine. So although they are these very big complex machines, and they are, we also think about not just the complexity, but the fun that they can create. So they're not just complex machines, they're also really fun and exciting instruments like this from Dato, which have unconventional interfaces. This particular one has a synth on one side and a sequence on the other side, designed to be played by two people. So there's lots of interesting novel ways of creating sound. This is an odd ball. This is a bouncy ball that if you bounce on the floor or you juggle with it, it will actually create some music. And this instrument, I think, is absolutely beautiful. This beautiful piece of wood. It's very organic, very natural looking. It's got these lovely brass tactile buttons on it. Not a conventional synthesizer, but it just sounds amazing. And all of these examples, there's not a piano key in sight. You can also play fruit if you want to. This is an example of playing strawberries. This company, Playtonik, also let you play cabbages if you want to with your hand. And this cabbage is being sequenced by a rotating turntable and someone's hand moving into it. So lots of weird and wonderful things you can do with electronic musical instruments. But they're not always just hardware as well, not physical hardware. They're also amazing multi-touch interfaces. This one is from another PM Studio resident, Pika Loop, which is an iPad app which lets you record things like this digger sound here, lets you put it onto the iPad and start to manipulate it and play in a really fun way. So there's no menus, no language. It's just direct, live, object-based sound and play. It's lots of fun. So when Pete and I first started 5 of 12 and thinking of ideas, generally in the pub, we kept starting conversations like, do you remember this synth X? It did this thing Y, and all these, reminiscing about the stuff we had from childhood and all these kind of things. We just kept coming back to how a few weird and wacky synths that had inspired us to build things. So we're going to talk about some of our inspirations now.
So this one is one of my favorites, the Tenorion. It's a handheld instrument with this large grid of light-up buttons, and the grid can be played in many different ways. There's lots of modes to explore. Although it's quite complicated to use, there's many layers of sounds and play modes. There's lots of fun to be had just exploring what's possible. I was lucky enough to have one for a little while, and it entertained my children for many hours. So they like to just colour it in and make horrible noise. They were more interested in the visuals than creating music.
Another synth which really inspired me, which you may have come across, is the OP1. So this is a little box about this big. It's just full of synth engines and various sequencers. What Pete showed on the previous slide was a form of a sequencer. Basically, sequencers are, many sequencers are ways of giving an instruction of when to play the note. So when those dots were moving along, if there was a lit up dot, it would play in a sequence. This has got lots of many other really crazy sequences, one of them being a tombola here, where you basically fling notes into the tombola, like these balls, and when they collide with the edge of the tombola, they make a sound. This is me trying to make something vaguely ambient and chaotic with the tombola. If you squint, you can see the tiny blue balls up there. And I'm just tweaking the behavior of the synthesizer and the behavior of the physics with the tombola and trying to create something vaguely ambient. So that's the OP1. Another joint favourite of ours. Has anyone seen this before? Animusic. Has anyone come across Animusic? It's quite a rare. Okay, cool. This was formed back in 1990, actually, by a guy called Wayne Little. And he was imagining these instruments, contraptions, that the sort of robotic performances, where there's not actually a synth being played. It's all virtual. There are all these virtual instruments that don't really exist, but all the music's driven by this animation. In fact, the music's really driven by the MIDI signals, which we'll come back to later. But here's an example of animusic. So again, there's no physical synthesizer, it's all computer-generated imagery. But you'll see when these ball bearings are bouncing with the strings and the drums and the tubes, they're all making some kind of amazing music. And yeah, if you can ever grab animusic on DVD or it's obviously on YouTube now, it's really fun to watch. And yeah. So what we got excited here was this idea about physics and the visual element of the synthesizer and the experience. So we started to think about some of our most favourite instruments that we liked were all quite fun. They're not particularly serious instruments. And we started to think about how they generally encourage play and experimentation. They tended to engage more than just the sort of the audible senses, but things like the tactility of it and the obviously the visual feedback. And how a lot of them also started to behave like games. Like they would tend to be quite fun and like toys. So yeah.
So as well as musical influences, we also talked about the different kinds of technologies we might want to use. So that included things that we were already familiar with and also things we wanted to learn. So something we wanted to learn is mixed reality, or XR. We'd both worked adjacent to XR tech for many years at Ultraleap, but our focus was always on using hand tracking for flat screen uses like your laptop or a big display in a public space. But in mixed reality, you can combine virtual objects with your environment, which gives the opportunity for larger scale interactions than we were used to. And this was something we were excited to explore. Something a little bit more familiar to us. We wanted to keep working with game engines. We've both been working with the Unity game engine for many years, so we know it very well. So this is a place that we can explore new ideas really quickly and focus on the ideas and not the technical side so much. So how would you use a game engine to make a musical instrument? This is maybe not an obvious thing to do. There could be many answers to this question, but for us, the important thing was the physics simulation. As you could see from our influences, we were really interested in this physical interaction. So we wanted to build something that responded to your input in a physical way. To build this from scratch would have taken a long time. But using a game engine like Unity, we have access to a robust system that's well tested. And that means that we can focus on the behavior we want to capture and less on the details of how it works. So in this little video here, you can see how we're just using that engine as a playground. We've set up a scene with objects that are bouncing around, and every time they bounce off the surface, they can make a sound. That starts to build something which could suggest an instrument. The other aspect that we touched on earlier that we attracts us to the game engines is the interactive visuals. So game engines are built for creating visually engaging worlds. And so it gives you access to many wonderful tools for doing 2D and 3D graphics, particle systems, shaders, animations, different kinds of lighting. So this little video here is showing sort of a comparison of how if you have a small amount of animation and visual feedback describing the scene, you get less information communicated. And then on the other side of the video, there's an example of how it works if you add a lot more animation to the scene and you get a more responsive visual. So at this point, we had some ideas and a sense of what kind of tech we wanted to use. So we started moving into experimenting with concepts. So here's a small snippet of a very large whiteboard that's full of different kinds of notes. You see, we started to bring ideas together from the influences that we had. Some were quite detailed, some were quite vague, but there's definite themes that were already emerging. So one of the first things that we built was a recreation of the Tombola sequencer that we saw earlier, but this time in XR. So the idea being, once you bring it into a different space, you could place it into your world, there could be new opportunities for interaction. This looked cool and was a little bit fun, but it wasn't as satisfying as we hoped. So another idea, this one had been in the back of our minds for quite some time, was a slinky. It's a very physical object, something that you could imagine holding in your hands and moving each end of it. And then we could generate sounds, maybe from the length of the spring. This one turned out to take a lot of programming, and we didn't get it that far. But it did look fun. The bouncy ball concept kept coming back. The simplicity of those physics had a certain appeal. So we tried again in 3D. So this time we trapped the balls in a three-dimensional shape instead of the sort of 2D tombola shape. And we made it so that you could move the outer shape around, thereby triggering collisions inside it. And this kind of started to behave a little bit like a cross between maracas and a wind chime. And we called it a space orb. So this idea really stuck out. It was immediately fun to play with, and it really captured the elements that had interested us at the beginning. So we decided to just develop this one further. And the app started to take shape. So here's a little run through of how the different concepts were added to the app. At this point, we were still thinking that we would end up building this for a mixed reality experience. But to speed up the development, we started out focusing on the touchscreen because the iteration cycle during development was faster. So we gave the app a name, which is Playtonik, and we settled on a set of features which made for a really enjoyable playing experience. So what did we end up with? Well, there's the big shape, as we saw before, and this time it's a dodecahedron. You can move this around with your finger to make it spin and move side to side. Inside the shape, you've got the smaller balls. These represent the notes that will sound when they hit the sides. We added a musical keyboard, which let you control which notes would sound and when. And the keyboard mapped to a musical scale. So this makes it easier to play in tune and harder to play a wrong note. So in the video that's playing here, you can see we got all of this working, and it was giving us access to the sort of gentle ambient sounds and movement that we were looking for. And then we tested it on our friends and family, and this happened. Our testers weren't using the app how we expected. I couldn't quite trace the source of the quote on the screen, which is, "No product survives first contact with users." But this is something that came up a lot during our time developing products. And that's, you don't quite know what you've built until you try it with people.
We thought we'd built a music app for musicians, because music tech people are very easy to sell to. They love a new gadget. They're even happy to sometimes spend a bit of money. But the majority of people we tested with really mainly engaged with the physical interactions that this app gave. The tactility itself was quite compelling, and the touchscreen sort of haptic feedback and everything else. And that changed a little bit about how we thought about what we'd made. And I said, Pete's partner, who was in the previous slide, flicking the app very quickly, she was the one that actually coined the phrase he basically made a musical fidget toy. So we sort of ran with that, and that's all in our App Store blurb now, musical fidget toy. That was born. The fidget user is a really great stress tester. They want lots of stimulation and will really push things to the extreme. So they're a really good way of doing a QA and testing. So the main lesson here was that just try and find people who will seek out and push at the edges of what you're making, get them to break stuff, right, basically. We had some instances where the ball would just leave the orb, the space orb would just fly out into space because they're spinning it so fast. We had to fix that. One of the other places we found great inspiration from and learnt a lot from was in the studio here where you are right now, both at First Friday and at Show and Test at the studio, which if you've not been to First Friday before, it's always on the first Friday of the month. Good pitch. And I urge you to come along because it's a really great way to try out new things, make connections and see what other creative people are doing in the studio. This particular example, I think it was First Friday, and we had a really broad range of feedback from, I can see this being great for entertaining kids for hours, I could see this being used in a music therapy scenario, to more sort of pro music user feedback, like I probably wouldn't use this for more than a minute unless it could help me make actual music and fit into my workflow, which is fair enough. If you're a professional, that's what you want. And all this feedback sort of fed into new features. So this is quite early on, probably about a month after we launched on the App Store. People wanted a way to record the music. So yeah, we took on this feedback, and we actually ended up, from literally the next week, bringing out the looper feature, which everyone had been asking for. So this is basically a way of recording a loop and storing it and playing it back. And this gave you a way of sort of starting to produce a workflow that lets you work with other instruments and potentially other musicians as well. Pete? Yeah.
So for the public launch, we wanted to focus on making the app easy to play and have fun, so that it had the broadest appeal. So we focused our design around there being 5 shapes, each with its own sound, and providing lots of different musical scales for you to play on the keyboard to add variety. The shapes we chose are the Playtonik solids, which is a set of shapes that follow a set of mathematical rules, which I'm not going to go into because I can't remember them. But while researching them, we found that each one of the Playtonik solids represents one of the classical elements. So that's earth, fire, wind, water, and a late addition, ether, or space, as we interpreted it. So we use this to choose the sounds for each shape, and ensure that each one has its own character. But even though we decided to keep things really simple, people always want more sounds.
The music fades in and we hear about a love story, which started in the 80s between some of these guys. And 2 people in particular, Dave Smith and Ikitaru Kakahashi, members of 2 different synthesizer companies, were saying to each other, no synth is an island, Dave, no synth is an island, Taro. Maybe they didn't say that. But in 1983, synths were becoming very popular. A lot of the music was driven by synthesizer music. It was becoming a real thing. But they didn't talk to one another. The musicians would play in the same room, but there was no way of making connections between these instruments. There was no common language. So Smith and Kakahashi got together with a couple of other people as well, some other Japanese manufacturers, to bring about a new kind of interface, a new language for making a universal way of these instruments to talk to one another. And they invented MIDI, this musical instrument digital interface. So the basic idea of MIDI is that if you connect a keyboard to another keyboard and you say, I play a key, and the other keyboard has MIDI as well, they go, oh, I got that key, I'll play that sound. Very, very basic way, but effectively it's a kind of way of syncing up and getting these instruments to talk to each other. And this is where the love story happened at this particular trade show in 1983, so 42 years ago. And look how happy they are. They're very happy. I wanted to do a really deep dive on MIDI, and I probably could do a whole hour on it, but this is one quick minute of what MIDI is all about. I couldn't find a better explanation than this guy, Nathan Noakes' one. So yeah, just as a quick introduction to what MIDI is and a good explanation about it.
Now, MIDI stands for Musical Instrument Digital Interface and is used in a wide variety of musical uses today. It's essentially just a digital protocol designed for electronic instruments and computers. Today, MIDI is now used in almost every single aspect of music creation, from composing and arranging, to playing music, to recording music, mixing and mastering music in the studio, even in controlling stage lights. What's truly interesting about MIDI is that despite the fact that it's used so much today in music, it doesn't actually create any sound itself. It just creates information to create sound. Now, there's other examples of this happening in music history. For instance, player piano rolls and music boxes all contain information to create sound. The player piano roll itself isn't sound. And in a way, music notation itself is not music, but information to create music.
The takeaway here is that MIDI is the information, not the music. It connects instruments and musicians together. And it's got this universal language. And it's been doing so for as long as I've been alive, in 1983, so 42 years ago. I find it quite amazing. This is the only graph, the only chart that you will see today, and I've made it really fancy with this background. This is the only chart. Can anyone guess what the y-axis represents? Anyone know what that might be? There's a guess of that? Version number, very close. Yeah, pretty much. So basically, this is the number of releases, the version numbers of MIDI that we've had since 1983 to 2020, so 47 years ago. And I have to say, I stole this graph from a recent conference at ADC from a guy called Julian Storer, but I just loved it because of the simplicity of basically how long it stood the test of time. And it's a testament to the great format and the work that these guys did at the beginning to make it last this long. And we talk about cables, but actually Bluetooth, the whole app will connect through Bluetooth as well. Bluetooth wasn't a thing in 1983, and it's still stood up against that. So it hasn't changed an awful lot. It still works. Over to Pete.
So being MIDI fans, we had built MIDI connectivity into Playtonik very early in its development, and that let us plug our synths in and to try out new sounds or to play melodies in from a keyboard and different sources. And MIDI is really Playtonik's serious side, because with MIDI in place, it becomes a sequencer and a performance tool, and not just a fidget toy. We couldn't possibly fill up the app with all the sounds that we would ever want, but with MIDI, there's a way to access endless sounds using external synths.
I'm giving the game away. So we love MIDI so much, as you well know by now. I said to Pete, let's enter it into this Innovation Awards competition, which the MIDI Association runs. So every year they do this Innovation Award, and there's lots of different categories: hardware, software, and we entered it into the non-commercial software prototype category because at the time we were still prototyping it. We hadn't actually finished the app, and lo and behold, a few months later we won. So over a glass of wine. We got to enjoy the award ceremony that was being given by Andrew Huang on YouTube, and we won the prize for the prototype, which is fun. And about a week later, or actually very soon after, I got to go to got to join the MIDI Association in a number of places in China, in Shanghai and Tokyo. I got to go to Music China, which is there's no photograph here that tells you how big it is, but this photograph, this expo center here is one of the biggest ones in Shanghai. It spanned 150,000 square meters, and someone told me if you wanted to walk all the way around all of the music stands and see all the kit, you'd have to walk 18 kilometers. So it was quite massive. It's vast. People playing drums all the different times, and it was just kind of crazy. And we later joined the MIDI Association in Tokyo for a really special event at the Kakahashi Foundation. Kakahashi was one of the founders of MIDI. They built this amazing building in memorial to him. And Tokyo Gaki, which was a much more sort of intimate, it's still an exhibition of lots and lots of instruments, but the scale was much smaller. You could walk around it in a few minutes, and probably not much bigger than the studio actually here. So I got to get immersed in MIDI for 2 weeks, and it was absolute bliss. But one of the best things about this as well was that because of the language barrier, I obviously didn't speak very good Chinese, well, no Chinese, tiny bit of Japanese, very little, but English wasn't the first language for a lot of people. So this is a really interesting opportunity and experience to study the natural behavior of how people interacted with the app without leading the witness, without prompting people, and really discovering the weird and wonderful ways people were trying to use the app. For example, they were trying to change the color around the orb a little bit and not really touching the orb. And they were doing very precise sort of finger strokes up the keys, which we hadn't really seen much before. So yeah, really interesting to sort of observe that behavior. And it's probably going to feed back into some of the things we build for future updates. This guy was playing a MIDI recorder, I guess a recorder with a USB cable into the app, and we were sending MIDI notes. So yeah, it's really fun. And yeah, just had a great time. And no trip to Japan would be the same without going to a synth store and picking up one of my very sought-after instruments called the Omnichord. This again is a weird and wonderful instrument. It's got like chord buttons, and you sort of strum across it. And when I got back, my wife said, "Oh no, not another synth," and I'm really sorry. But she actually really loves this one, so it's kind of a present for both of us. But yeah, that was So that was kind of the end of my MIDI journey. Was ending up back in the store, and you can't really see behind, but Bob Moog, who's from Moog Synthesizers, was one of the sort of founders of MIDI, and it just sort of wrapped up the whole story and the whole journey. Pete.
Yeah. So to summarize. We were inspired by games and synths and impossible instruments, and we decided to build an app to figure out how we would work together. We weren't initially sure what it was going to be, but by combining our interests in synths and experimenting with game engines, we built a musical fidget toy. And our love of MIDI and novel interactions led us to win an award, and it took us to wonderful places.
I think that's it from us. Thank you very much for listening. Cheers. Thank you. I just wanted to say a massive thanks to the studio for helping to support the trip to Asia as well, and also for hosting the show and test and First Friday. Also, big thanks to everyone here for listening, and a tiny picture of Tom down here. Tom has been really helpful with really amazing work on Playtonik for adding features like the looper. And yeah, loads of other stuff that we haven't even talked about today, but he's been a really great person to work with on Playtonik. If you're interested in knowing more about what we do at 5 of 12, please check out the website and get in touch. If you have an iPhone or a Mac or an iPad, you can download the Playtonik app for free from the QR code there. And yeah, thanks so much again. Cheers.
All right. Yeah, let's do it again. Any questions, Alexi? You. Yeah, so the folks at home can hear.
What? Why are you called 5 of 12, and what does that mean?
I knew that was going to come up. Shall I answer that one first? Or do you want to I'll give it a go. So the really boring answer is that we were in the pub, and Pete said that he lives at the Octagon at number 5, but there were 12 houses, and I said you live at 5 of 12 houses, but it's called the Octagon. So it was a really boring, drunk conversation. But then the other bit about it was we thought we found these numbers coming up quite a lot in terms of like just numbers in nature, like things like there's five fingers, or 5 notes in a pentatonic scale, 12 notes in a chromatic scale. We were talking about music quite a lot, and yeah, that was. Have I missed any other obscure anecdotes, Pete, about 5 of 12?
Only the slightly nerdy Star Trek reference to it being a Borg designation.
Yeah, but that was basically it was basically a pub conversation, as most things are.
So one thing I found really funny is how we have like 10 digits, but actually like 12 sections on each hand. Mm-hmm. Like if you count 1, I think 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like in one hand as well. Like you capture 5 of 12.
Yeah, it's like there's 5 days in the week, there's 12 months in the year. These numbers just kept coming up quite a lot. So yeah.
Any other questions from the room?
That was really interesting, thanks. You are obviously quite inspired at the start by, like quite tactile interfaces and appreciated the sort of value of that. So like looking forwards, is there a future where you can see this idea sort of escaping the app and returning to the physical world?
Yes, so Pete and I have been talking for a long time about wanting to make hardware, because obviously touchscreens, not the most tactile, although you can have haptic feedback, they're not, especially on an iPad, you get no feedback. So yeah, most things that are tactile tend to be physical objects that you can grab and manipulate. So yeah, Pete, do you want to talk about interest in hardware and things? Or?
I can. I guess there's the other thing that you may have spotted through the talk is that we had plans to make this into a mixed reality experience. That hasn't happened yet, but is still there. That's also virtual, so you don't get the tactile element. But one of the ways we'd like to explore making it physical is if you have a physical prop that you can hold, but in the mixed reality experience, you can have the visual style that we've got within the app, but controlled by just a simple prop that you hold in your hand. And the movements of the prop could drive the motions in the app. So there's kind of mixed interaction modes that we'd like to explore, as well as totally standalone hardware versions of similar concepts.
Like the boxes are actually becoming part of a playable surface. So like this idea that everything's playable, like maybe a coffee cup or a box or a laptop. You know, so there's trying to introduce some kind of tactile thing in future. Yeah, definitely.
I think there was one online.
Yeah, question from online, which I think might be sort of the opposite of that. I'm not sure. They say, thank you for the talk. Do you have any plans to open up your app to be used as an external controller?
Well, it does. So we didn't cover it, but it does currently have a way of sending out external MIDI controls. Yeah. So we one of the features that came back from the original First Friday was they wanted to build it into their workflow a bit more. So we have already had MIDI output, so you can send MIDI notes out. But the control element that I think they're alluding to is things like control changes and being able to, tweak the lighting or something from some kind of signal. So we do actually have that in the app now. So you can do. We didn't show it, but I've got a video of where I've got like these mechanical faders moving in synchrony with the balls hitting the edges. So each ball could be a particular control change signal, and yeah, I think that's what they're asking. But yeah, that is available. It's currently, so the app is free, but there's an in-app purchase to enable that. It's sort of like a pro. There's like Playtonik and Playtonik Pro kind of thing. So yeah, that's where we have it now.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, Pete and Ann. I've got two questions, which is quite selfish. First one is, which is your favourite shape in Playtonik? I really like the look of the triangle, just from looking at it. And the second is, I'd love if you could talk a bit more about how you interpreted the like element aspect of bringing those into each shape and what like that meant from a practical aspect.
I think Pete should start with that one because he was the designer behind the shapes.
Question number one is easy. The dodecahedron is my favorite. The dodecahedron represents space, which the ether element, and that's my favorite because it's got the biggest reverb, so it sounds big. It's easy to make it sound good. In terms of theming and using those influences of the elements, first to run through how they map. So the tetrahedron, which is the triangle, that's fire. The cube, or a hexahedron, is earth. The octahedron is air. Dodecahedron, space. And icosahedron is water. So we used that influence in sort of three areas of the design, I think. One is the visuals. So you've got the colourful background and particle effects, which are responding to the collisions. Those are sort of themed to be suggestive of the element that goes with them. It's not too obvious, but it's sort of, while designing, that was sort of in mind. There's the actual behavior of the shape. So the elements like fire, the shape is very light, so the collisions make a big effect on the movement. So you get it dancing around kind of like a flame a little bit more. Whereas the icosahedron, which is water, that one's very heavy. It's very damped. It sloshes around, was kind of the effect we were going for. And then similarly in kind of the sound selection, we were trying to make sounds which matched the feel of the shapes. So the earth sound is kind of woody. It's a percussion sound. The air shape is a little bit more protracted, less of an impulsive sound. Like I said, the dodecahedron has the really big reverb, so it's a really big sound. Sounds like you're in space. And there's a fourth way that we actually mapped it, which has just come to mind, which is how many balls you can put into each shape. So we use the number of sides that goes with the shape to set how many balls you can have. So the tetrahedron can have 4 balls, icosahedron can have 20. And that really changes how you perform as well, because you can build really complex soundscapes in one end and maybe faster changing, more vibrant soundscapes at the other. Does that
Very much.
answer the question?
Great. Thanks. I'll go over here.
Hiya. I was wondering if you considered making Playtonik into a plugin that you could use in DAW.
Yes.
Just pick it up.
Yeah,
in Pro
definitely. That's
Tools,
definitely
etc.
so we did have a whole section on what we're going to do next. But yeah, one of the things is to move into doing audio plugins. And actually, this was an experiment in taking purely just a game engine, seeing whether it could make a music app. But yeah, that's definitely in our to-do list. And also things like Android support and all that stuff that comes along with people wanting it in every platform. But yeah, it's a good idea. Thank you.
Yeah, great talk. Yeah, just wondered if you could expand on the fidget toy element and whether it's like a fidget toy or is a fidget toy. And do you know of any users who have replaced their fidget toy with
That's a really good
choice with this?
That's a good question. So it's only from really observing people using it in the show and test. And I guess, like, Pete, your observation with your partner bringing that up as a fidget toy. But does Giz refer to it as a fidget toy now, or how does he talk about it?
That is a very good question. Everyone in my family, when I showed it to them, used it as a fidget toy while I was watching them. I don't know if they open it when I'm not watching. So I don't know if it's replaced the fidget toys in their day-to-day lives, but when they do use it, that's how they engage.
Yeah, the one thing I saw, which was probably the most fun thing I saw in my trip in Japan, was because in the Tokyo Gaki Expo, it was open to families. So families came out, and there were these like young kids, must have been like under 10, and there was one kid that was just came up, sort of, sniffing around like that, and came up to the app and was there for a good 10-15 minutes. And his parents were behind him, and they were saying, "Oh, thank you so much for making this, because this will keep him entertained on the way home in the car." So there's I guess there's it kind of appeals to different people, different personas, and how they might use it. I think there are people that would like to do the whole adding external CC control. There's sort of the more pro end MIDI people, and then there's the people that would just treat it as a fidget toy and something to entertain them in the car. Yeah.
Can I ask, actually, could you expand on that a bit? Because obviously you started thinking of this as like a synth nerd product, and then you went to the fidget toy more casual user end, and then but also kept up that idea of it being a pro product.
Yeah.
I was wondering how you thought about do we want to focus in on one aspect really narrowly, or go really broad and try and target a wide audience? We
tried to keep it as simple, like the app itself, and not add. One of the bits of feedback was don't put too much into it, so don't make it too complex. Keep it simple. So yeah, we definitely see there's two main users or personas that are the casual, just wanting to make fidget toy, kind of play around with some stuff. But then the pro side of it was we had many ideas for, this could be really good for controlling visuals, or good controlling an external gear, or doing all kinds of weird, crazy, fun stuff. And there's lots of features we haven't added there, but I guess we've tried to maintain a balance, Pete, between the sort of the play side and the pro side. You say that's about right?
Yeah, I think it is difficult balancing both those things because they're very different. And so every time we think of a feature, that conversation is had is, who is this benefiting? Is this for somebody who's just wanting to fidget and have a bit of fun, or is it for someone who's really trying to make music? And the way that we've approached that is we actually try to deliberately make each feature work for both, because the same interface seems to work in two ways. And for us at the moment, we're just a few people working on this. It's much easier to maintain one product than two, so we've kept it as one. But we just try to keep those two different users in mind and make sure that when we build something, we're not excluding anybody. And what that means is we hope there are people who will engage with it for fun, and then we'll discover that it can go further, and maybe they get into trying to make music with other things and connecting it and seeing what it can do with other instruments, and maybe it can be that gateway.
Brilliant.
This might just be because I'm quite visual, but I just think it's like gorgeous. I can't believe it. Like I'm just trying it on my phone now, and like it's not making any sound, and it's still mesmerizing. It just sort of felt like maybe you kind of skipped through that moment where these ripples appear around the object. You talked about the kind of technological steps you got to, and you wanted a shape in the middle. Yeah. But then there's a sudden jump where you suddenly have this gradient of ripples, and I was wondering what the inspiration was behind that element of it.
That was mainly all Pete. Pete, do you want to go shaderland, ripple-land, particles?
That's one of those ideas that just happened one afternoon and has stuck around ever since. So it was put into the app very early on, and we've almost not changed it at all. But I wanted to kind of convey that, as you say, ripples, like when a sound is emitted by the shape, you see it propagate through space. And I was trying to work out how I could write this as a shader, which is the sort of the language that graphics cards speak, for making really complicated patterns in the computer. I failed to figure out how to do it as a shader, how I wanted. So what you're actually seeing is a collection of objects which are inside out. So you can see the inside surface of them, and then they're all stacked on top of each other. So it's kind of like unfolding an origami, set of interlocking origami pattern is how I see it in my head. But it's really just something like 20 of the same object overlapping each other. And then as they move around, they're trying to track the main shape, but as they get further away, they track it slower. So you get that kind of delayed ripple effect.
Record on there, right? Can you record the pattern like as a visual?
So that was one of the things that came up from Show and Test and from First Friday, was that could we just have a visual version of it onto a screen, like plug it into a TV or a projector and do the projection. You could do a screen recording, sure. In theory, you can get a video feed out of it as well, but it's not one thing we've done so far. Like there are lots of like VJ kind of apps that you can get that do that kind of stuff, but it's definitely one thing we've considered and would like to look into more for the visual side of things. Yeah.
Awesome, thanks.
Thank you. Great.
Any last questions from the audience? If not, then we'll say thank you again to Ant and Pete.
Cool. Thank you, too.
All right, before you all go, if you want to stick around and hot desk today or find out more about what we do, then please come find one of the studio team and we'll be happy to help. Studio team, I think, is just me and Joe right now. If you're watching online, drop us a line on studio@watershed.co.uk with any questions. Thank you all for being here today, and we'll see you again next time.
Cheers.